back to Big Ideas Made Simple. I'm Jess Weber, and I have spent the better part of the last few weeks getting challenged on my own ideas, which is truly, honestly, exactly what this show was supposed to do. So today, I want to circle back and revisit some of the concepts that I talked about in episodes 13 and 14 and build off them while giving you a piece of them that I might not have fully handed over to you last time. So, as always, the podcast is one idea stripped down to what actually matters. And let's get into it. Now, last episode, I did introduce a concept that has since started some really interesting conversations. I said that your North Star is a filter, not a destination. And the response to that was something that I honestly didn't anticipate, which was that people were pushing back asking whether that filter was really just another way of saying your big why. And I want to spend a minute with that because to me, the answer is no. And that distinction matters way more than I probably made clear in the last episode. So here's the version of that pushback that hit the hardest for me. Someone I was talking to said, "That's really interesting, but nobody who is trying to feed their family can think about a North Star. And they definitely can't name a big why or even picture a big what," which is to me the outward expansion of impact or vision after you achieve your kind of more internal and personal big why. And because of my unique positioning and what I get to watch, both in my own life and the lives of so many people that I work with, is that the people who are most exhausted are not the ones who are lacking ambition or the capacity to drive. They're the ones who have been using whatever got them moving as the only filter for every decision they make. And what gets you moving is not always built to do that job in a sustained way. So today, what I want to talk about is the separation between the things that I just listed: your big why, your big what, and your North Star. And I want to talk about how each shows up in someone's life because they're not all at once and they're not always even in the order that you expect. So let's go there. First things first, I want you to picture life not as a singular mountain with one summit that you are trying to reach, but more so as a mountain range. It's a series of climbs, and each one is going to have a starting point, its own base camp, and its own peak. And after you climb one, you will get to the top and you'll see that there's another one right there next door waiting for you. And this matters because a lot of the exhaustion that I see coming from high capacity people isn't about the climb they're on. It's about reaching a summit that they worked incredibly hard for and then realizing the feeling that they expected to be at that peak isn't there. Or getting to that peak and feeling like the thing that they were looking for is actually on the next mountain or three over. And the motivation that they use to get to the top of that first one is not going to sustain them for the climb on the second or third or fourth. And that right there is not the failure of drive. That's the mismatch for me between the tool that you use to get moving and the tool that you need to stay oriented across the whole mountain range. So let's go into those three things and the order that I believe that they tend to show up in. So, your big why. This is a concept that's been around for ages. Simon Sinek made it really popular. But the big why is the thing that gets you off the couch. It's the reason that you took a risk or let the safe thing say yes to the hard thing. And it's almost always personal. It's survival adjacent. I need to provide. I need to prove something. I need to get out of this situation, or I need to build something that I own. So your big why is real. It's necessary. And I do not want to make it feel like a small thing. Yet at the same time, it does have a limited range because it is built for the base camp of the mountain. It's the early part of your climb for the stage where the motivation you need is that fire in your belly. It's where a lot of people ride that feeling all the way up. They get a little steam behind them and they do achieve something. They summit something significant, but then they discover that that fire doesn't stay around long enough to automatically redirect them to the top of the next mountain. And that's where a North Star is different. For me, North Star language is more about purpose or calling. And it's that thread that I talked about in previous episodes that guides your decision making. That's why it's a filter and not a destination. A big why to me feels more destination oriented, and you don't have to achieve something like a checkbox with a North Star. You don't have to have it even before you start the climb. For a lot of people, the climb is the thing that creates the North Star awareness and clarity. It surfaces while you're in some level of momentum. So it's not created through meditation or planning, but it's created through movement. And you get to a season where you start to notice what consistently pulls you, what kind of impact keeps showing up across the very different things that you've done. And that thread, that pattern is the North Star trying to get your attention. Once you name it, then it becomes that kind of fixed point for you, the thing that doesn't move when everything else does. If you think about the language of a North Star in actual navigational settings, I mean, you don't have to be a cartographer to know that the North Star sits at true north and everything orients from it. That is what that filter, that purpose, that calling, that thing does for you. It's not changing when you summit a mountain. It doesn't change when you summit a different mountain. It doesn't reset with every climb. It travels with you across everything that you do. And so that's why I wanted to call it a filter, or the thing that you run your decisions through to see whether what you're saying yes to or no to is pointing you towards what you're really desiring to build. Whether or not you're just feeding the moment where you currently are, and that's it. Now, I mentioned big what, which is not as common of language in the authorship or thought leadership space. But for me, it's the next step or iteration after you achieve the first destination of a big why. So like I said, big why is more personal. I want to create a life for my family. I want to pay off my debt. I want to do this thing that directly impacts you personally. Your big what, on the other hand, is how are you going to leave a legacy? What impact are you going to make on the world or mark you're going to leave on the world that will exist long after you're gone? So a big what goes beyond revenue or titles or monetary gain, and it becomes this thing that changes the world a little bit more. And a lot of people have no idea what a big what is for themselves because they haven't achieved their big why and they don't have clarity on their North Star. And I want to tell you, if you're listening to this right now, that is okay. You are not behind because you don't have all those things named. The awareness is just the first step, right? Having an understanding that there is a trajectory and something that can anchor you can help you start looking for it or even naming your own. So you really just need to start with some level of orientation to make a step in a direction that will then help define everything else along the way. Now, if you've listened to other episodes or you were ever a listener of the I Love Coaching podcast as well, you'll know that I am one of the biggest fangirls of Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And one of my favorite books of his is Be Your Future Self Now. It talks about where people let their present circumstances define their future, and where you can make a move to let your future self define your present choices. So he flips the script and uses your goals and time as a tool to help you show up differently. And that book is another way to think about a North Star. That's your North Star working correctly. Because when you have a sense of who you're becoming and what that version of you makes possible for yourself and others, your filter starts to build itself around that newly defined identity. So decisions that don't belong become easier to say no to because the ones that do are abundantly clear and obvious. Here is the thing that doesn't get said enough, though. If you don't have clarity on that yet, if you genuinely can't name your purpose or picture your future self clearly, that's not a you problem. It's usually the signal that you are still in the middle of something, a season, a climb, or you're still developing that thread. And the answer is not to stop and figure it out before you take another step. It's the challenge is to keep moving and paying attention and noticing what's showing up. So, all I'm telling you is that clarity comes from the continued motion. You are not behind. And I'm telling you, please do not stop doing what you're doing. Just start paying more attention. And so I want to tell you about a time for me that this really started to kind of settle in or click, even though I didn't have all of the language that I just shared with you. So my son Thomas was born medically complex. He has a cardiac history, 6 heart surgeries, all those things that I have mentioned previously. And I'm happy to share in depth with anybody who wants to talk to me about it. But during his heart journey, we were connected with the Children's Heart Foundation through his pediatric cardiologist. And the president of the local chapter and his wife have several heart kiddos of their own. And so that connection, especially during COVID, became a resource, a community, and so much more for our family. But what they asked us to do was to be the Heart Warrior honoree family at the annual gala a couple years after this. So Thomas was on the other side of his surgeries, and they created such an incredible experience to showcase what their research does in terms of creating grants to save lives. So we were at this event with a timeline of Thomas's heart journey in photos and stories on the wall, a video montage that we created during all of these events and surgeries, and my husband, Forrest, standing in front of that room delivering a speech about our family's experience that he had written entirely himself. And so I want to stay with that for a split second because, if you've listened to me, I am the one who does the talking in this family professionally. I build the frameworks, I find the words, I write the scripts. And Forrest, who is incredibly brilliant and one of the best writers I've ever met, stood up in front of that room and said things about our journey and the value of pediatric cardiology research that I couldn't have done any better myself. He didn't need me for one word of it. That was 100% his. And then right next to him was Thomas, about a year and a half old, dressed in his little suit and bow tie, completely unaware that anything was significant. But he had recently, right before that event, invented what he called the pie dance, which he came up with in Costco because he was excited that pumpkin pies were available. And at that time, with his speech, it came out as pie dice. And there was a little dance. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see me do the little wiggle. And he did that dance on stage right after Forrest's speech to a room of 500. And so because it was a charity gala and an auction, and he was an adorable child in a bow tie, he helped people understand the impact of research and what it does. And his little pie dice, which was one of the cutest things I have ever seen, raised enough money in that room for 3 full research grants, which are each $150,000. And so I say all of this because I sat there and felt something go through myself quietly. So it wasn't dramatic, there weren't fireworks like you see in Zoom, but it was so clear when I looked around that room and thought, none of this is about me. The photos on the wall, Forrest's speech, Thomas dancing in a bow tie, the 450 plus $1,000 that were raised. That was the clearest space that my North Star has ever been in. And it wasn't about me. Because what I realized in that room was that I really wasn't building for myself. I had been building so that I could benefit people in the middle of hard things. So I could make connections to knowledge, tools, or resources to help somebody go have impact of their own. My goal, my big what, is not my name on something. It's what becomes possible for someone else when I show up and share my work. So, my big why of providing for my family and being present for my kid got me climbing. But my North Star kept me oriented. And my big what was in that room in the faces of the people who had just given money to keep other heart kids alive and create more research opportunities for Thomas and so many more. So, when purpose points outward, the filter stops becoming the question. It becomes this gut instinct, this innate response where you just know. So, again, I'll go back to episode 13 for a second here, too. Break, examine, audit, tune, that beat method that I created as a tool, it's there for auditing what you are operating from, and it's going to work. But what I have to say here is that audit is only useful as a thing if you know what you're auditing towards. If you don't have a North Star or you're borrowing it from somebody else, that audit will likely surface a whole lot of information and give you very little direction. You'll know that something doesn't fit, but you will have no idea how to replace it with something that does. And that's what I was getting at in the following episode about North Stars, episode 14. Your North Star has to be yours, not the one that an industry or an organization or a leader has handed you, not the one that your family created for you at birth. It's the one that you pick, you choose, that you own. And so this episode is focused on saying that even a rough, partially formed North Star is enough to start filtering from. You don't need to have the Hubble telescope clear picture. You need enough of a fixed point to start asking yourself the question, does the opportunity in front of me point towards what I want, or does it just feel like it's feeding the space that I'm standing in now? Because here is the thing that I keep seeing happen over and over again. Someone climbs incredibly hard. They reach something real, and then they make the next decision from the same motivation that drove the first climb without stopping to ask whether the new mountain requires a different kind of yes from them. Your North Star does not move, but your relationship to it can deepen as you climb. And every summit will give you that cleaner view of what you've been pointed towards all along. So here's the thing that I'm going to ask you to do after I conclude this episode. Find a decision that you are currently sitting on, something you have been circling around without being able to land on, and ask yourself this question. Does this point towards what I am building, or does it feed the need of where I am right now? If you can answer the question, you have a North Star. You might not have a name for it yet. You might not have the clear language, but you have the feeling to filter with. And if you can't genuinely answer it, if both options feel completely equal and there is no internal pull, that is information for you as well. It means the decision is not actually the problem. It means that you might need a few more steps up the mountain before the view gets clear. Either way, you are not behind, you're just climbing. So, again, this is episode 15 of Big Ideas Made Simple. And if something here is sitting with you, I would love for you to reach out to me and tell me. Come find me either on social media at the Jess Weber, double S, double B, or bigideasmadesimple.com, which is the space where my newsletter and all of these episodes live and where you can reach out to me directly as well. So, one idea worth thinking about straight into your world every week. And if you know somebody who is working incredibly hard right now but can't tell if it's going somewhere, send this episode to them. Sometimes the most useful thing that you can hear is that the problem is not effort, it's orientation. I'll see you on the next one.